The reason I've chosen the lifestyle I have is because I always wanted that little bit of independence and be in control of, the way we wanted to live our lives. I was never that fond of just being on that treadmill of day after day working for the man sort of thing. So very early on, I always, I was pretty handy with my money, and I've always worked and I've always saved so that I could have that independence. And over time, I've come in and out of teaching, but I've always, loved that connection with kids. And, I've liked the idea of helping people kind of reach their full potential. And so that's sort of why I ended up with the travel business, taking people to Nepal.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how and where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute of every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You'll hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested. Hi, freedom fighters. Let's start again with some questions. What does living by design really look like? And how much is enough? And as author Jeff Gaines cheekily asks us, why are so many of us too fat, too broke, and way too busy? It's another question that continues to plague me. In a world of unlimited knowledge and opportunity, why is this still even the case? And the stats are really scary. Repeated research demonstrates that nearly 2/3 of us are obese, 2 out of 3 of us are in a bad financial position, and a big majority are way busier than you'd like to be. Now, while there are stacks of reasons why this is the case, what is it that really separates those that are healthy, wealthy and free from those that are fat, broke and busy? If I was to boil it down to just one thing, there are those that make it happen and those that let it happen. As I discuss in my book, The Freedom Formula, there are a few that choose to live by design and a lot that allow themselves to live by default. Now, you're probably thinking, yeah, I've heard you say this before, Bushy, but what does living by design really look like? Well, to give you a much clearer picture and a living example of living by design, today's guest, Jim Smith, is the living epitome of what living with intent and living by design looks like in the flesh. And Jim's a great example because in many people's eyes, he's probably the antithesis of what most expect financially independent people to look like. Jim lives a very fulfilled life that flows from his financial freedom, where he has time on his hands because the majority of his income needs look after themselves without relying on him to generate them. And for me, this is what life is all about. Enjoying the fulfillment that only comes from giving freely and helping others without ever expecting anything in return. And this fulfillment flows from the freedom of being able to pursue your passions and interests. And this freedom results from having time on your hands. And time on your hands can only be created when the majority of your income needs are generated independent of you. Now, the key measures here are income and time. So just imagine a graph with increasing income being the vertical axis and increasing time being the horizontal axis, creating 4 separate quadrants. So in the bottom left-hand square are those that have very little income and very little time. A lot of hard-working Aussies unfortunately fall into this group. In the bottom right quadrant You have those that have little income but plenty of time. Part-time casuals and pensioners often fall into this area. Those that have time on their hands but don't have the income to do much about it. Then we have the top left quarter, the higher income but no time group. The majority of hard-working, time-poor professionals all fit into this category. They're earning good incomes but sacrificing their free time and their enjoyment to fund and maintain their high-cost lifestyles. And then finally, in the top right corner, we have the elusive nirvana. The select few who enjoy lots of free time with lots of income. This is where everyone wants to be. What about you? Where do you want to be? And where are you on the scale of income and time? Which quadrant do you fit into? How much free time and income do you have to pursue your passions and interests? How much time do you spend earning your income, and how much free time does that actually leave you? Do you feel stuck in that never-ending rat race and don't know how to get off? Where do you want to be, and what are you doing to make it happen? How are you creating your ideal lifestyle? And how have others done it? What's different about them and the way they think, the way they believe, and the way they behave? How can you start to follow their example? Well, this is where today's guest Jim Smith comes in. As you'll hear in today's conversation, in simple terms, Jim has designed his ideal life around what's important to him, and everything he's done over the years has been driven around making this happen. His lifestyle goals, his beliefs, and his behaviours are all in alignment. So to put it into a sentence, Jim has actually become a modest millionaire. And that's what you can and will become if you follow his example. Because it's never too late to start, but it's always too late to wait. And while we're on the subject, how did you feel and what did you immediately think when I mentioned the word millionaire? For many of you, I'm guessing you might be thinking, millionaire? I'll never be a millionaire. I'll never be in a position to be one, and I certainly don't want to be one of them. Now, when I used the millionaire word, did you imagine someone in a big McMansion driving flashy cars and living the high life? If so, you're probably way off the mark, because the greatest majority of millionaires are average Joes or Jodies, or in today's case, Jims, and most of them are like the guy next door. And if you want to shift from being rich but time poor to wealthy with time, freedom and fulfillment in your hands, then like it or lump it, you're going to need to become a millionaire. And anyone can do it, and I know you can do it. I'm not talking about flying private jets and being driven around by a chauffeur sipping on champers and scoffing caviar. Even a modest lifestyle where you have time and freedom will still require you to be a millionaire. Let me explain. If $100,000 is enough recurring passive income a year to fund your preferred lifestyle so that you've got the time and freedom to give freely to others, then you're going to need to invest in creating an income-producing nest egg of at least $2 million. And this is based on a 5% return from your income-producing investments, which is actually pretty ambitious given our current climate. You're more likely to need $2.5 million if you only get about 4% yield on your nest egg from interest, dividends, and rent. So how's your superannuation balance looking against this? The current average combined super balance for a couple nearing retirement in Australia is between $400,000 to $600,000. That's according to the Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia. How does relying on paying off your home loan and hoping that super is going to fund your lifestyle look against this? You'll need to invest beyond this if you're going to enjoy and sustain anywhere near a comfortable lifestyle long term. And the good news is that it's not hard to do if you've got enough time up your sleeve. If I can do it, then anyone can do it. So the core question you need to ask yourself is, how much is enough? How much is enough to fund your preferred lifestyle? Or is this the right question? Because every time I ask one of our new clients how much is enough, I get very vague answers, if I actually get an answer at all. In fact, most people respond by saying, "Oh, gee, Bushy, I'd never actually thought about that before." Well, perhaps a better question is how little is enough. How little is enough to fund your preferred lifestyle. As a rough rule of thumb, approximately 80% of your current income will fund your current lifestyle if you don't have a mortgage, assuming that you're enjoying your current lifestyle, of course. So to get your head around how little is enough, how about trying this experiment over the next 3 months? In month 1, live off 80% of your net income. In month 2, live off 60% of your income after tax. And in month 3, see how well you survive on just 40% of your current income. And to make it sustainable, make sure you bring forward the reward by shouting yourself as something you like at the end of each month. This will give you a very clear picture of what your income will allow you to do and if this is going to be sufficient to sustain you long term. Now, you may find that you're struggling on your current income and you actually may need more. But this is a great place to start because all you need to do is multiply your preferred lifestyle income by 20 times up to 25 times. And you know what your income producing nest egg number needs to be. Excluding, of course, the value of your home because your home doesn't actually put money in your pocket, it costs you money. And for most of you, this means you'll need to become a millionaire by the time you want to be able to stop working for money or to work less. And how do you become a modest millionaire? What characteristics, traits, beliefs and behaviours does the millionaire next door exhibit that the majority don't? Good old Jerry Harvey of Harvey Norman fame is a great example. His current net worth these days is about $1.8 billion. Now, my younger brother Ian, or Bushy Jr., has been a franchisee with Harvey Norman for many years, and he's currently driving the Malaysian expansion out of Kuala Lumpur. And I'll never forget him telling me about the very first time he met Jerry when he was interviewed to join Harvey Norman. Jerry was reclining back in his old chair with his feet on the table with cracks in the soles of his shoes and one of those old brick mobile phones by his side while he was eating banana. The absolute antithesis of what most people would expect. And the world's wealthiest living investor, Warren Buffett, with a current net worth of over $78.2 billion, is no different. He still lives in the same humble home he's lived in for decades, and he drives his car through the local McDonald's every morning to grab his burger and Coke. And today's guest, Jim Smith, has the same down-to-earth, easygoing and very generous approach. So what are the common traits and behaviours that characterise these modest millionaires? Stanley and Danko's classic book, The Millionaire Next Door, and the follow-up, The Next Millionaire Next Door, provide some great guides based on their extensive survey of millionaires. They identified a number of common traits among those who've successfully built wealth and funded lifestyles of freedom and fulfilment. These accumulators all exhibit the same qualities. Firstly, they live well below their means. They spend less than they earn, and they invest the rest. They also allocate their time, energy and money efficiently in ways that are conducive to building wealth to fund their lifestyle. Creating their financial freedom is actually a hobby. In other words, they live by design. Thirdly, they believe that financial independence and freedom is more important than displaying high social status. They're independent thinkers, and they don't care what other people think. They don't feel the need to follow the herd or to keep up with the Joneses by spending money they don't have on things they don't need to impress people who don't care. Fourthly, their parents didn't provide what they call economic outpatient care. In other words, overbearing gift-giving or hand-holding. In my case, my good father, the original Bushy, is an absolute classic example. Every time I'd ask him for something when I was young, he was famous for telling me that you can have absolutely anything that you want, son, just as soon as you've saved up enough money to buy it. Now, while I was quite disgruntled at the time because all my schoolmates were getting cars and getting looked after by their parents, this very simple early lesson in appreciating and respecting the habit of saving has been absolutely foundational in our journey. Number 5, they recognise the influences others have on their financial attitudes and behaviours, And they learn from those who are equally committed to financial success and accumulating wealth over and above just appearing to be rich. They're careful about who they spend time with. Number 6, they make consistently good consumer decisions, starting with where and how they live and understanding its potential effect on reaching their lifestyle financial goals. 7, they're good at assessing their strengths and weaknesses and improving in the key areas of frugality, owning responsibility for the financial outcomes, and developing the confidence to make decisions based on knowledge. Frugality, responsibility, and confidence are key. Number 8, they decide early on a philosophy for work in their careers that doesn't fall into the traditional view of work that dictates working from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. from ages 25 to 67. And they have the confidence and the courage to change their work and their career paths without fear if they need be. They're not scared to try something new and back themselves. And lastly, they all recognise that successful investing behaviours can be learned and improved, and that the fruits of effectively investing what is saved over time provides a security for more important aspects of their lives. Now, if we boil these behaviours down, we come up with 7 key lifestyle wealth-building behavioural characteristics. Number 1, confidence. Investing in knowledge as the first step and embracing discomfort as the pathway to learning. Number 2, frugality. Living below your means and investing the rest. 3, responsibility. That's 100% personal accountability and no excuses. 4, social indifference. Being comfortable in your skin and not needing or trying to keep up with the Joneses. 5, focus. Taking action on the important and the long term, not getting distracted with what you should do with the urgent and the immediate. 6, planning. Starting with the end in mind and having a mental GPS that's going to get you there. And finally, number 7, they all demonstrate delayed gratification. That elusive trait that so many ignore. And as I continue to ponder and research why so many of us continue to go for instant gratification now at the expense of our long-term benefit later, I stumbled across a brilliant insight from Jeff Gaines. He's observed that our ability to delay gratification is driven very much by how we feel about ourselves and our lives now. He believes that no one's good at delayed gratification. But if someone is feeling good about themselves and their life right now, in other words, they're feeling gratified right now, then they're happy to wait for a different gratification later. But if we don't feel good right now, then we'll grab the fast food or we'll spend the money. We'll do whatever we need to feel better as quick as we can now before worrying about anything in the future. So the key here is to get yourself in a place where you're feeling gratified now, as a precursor to investing in things that create a much bigger reward later. And for me, this comes back to feeding myself and health before we can create wealth. By feeding your mind, your soul and your body to create your happy habits. Daily gratitude affirmations and meditations for your mind and soul, reading great books, and eating healthy food with good sleep and exercise for your body. They all put you in a position of feeling gratified and satisfied with where you're at now. You're then emotionally and mentally ready to invest in your long-term delayed gratification. Just try it and see how the integration of self, then health, will create your wealth in an upward self-perpetuating cycle of growth. So what about you? How do you rate yourself against these financial freedom characteristics? If you want to test yourself against these 7 characteristics for a bit of fun, feel free to email me at bushy@khgroup.com.au with Wealth Potential Test in the subject header. And I'll send you the link to a free quiz that you can do in about 2 minutes that'll let you know where you're at as a really good place to start. Because the great news is that all of these traits and behaviours can be learned and inculcated. It's just about mirroring others who've done it and developing your own set of happy habits and rewarding rituals. And a great place to start is by mirroring the approach of today's guest, Jim Smith. Jim has successfully set up his life so that he's now devoting his time to building Focus Tours. Focus Tours is a fusion of Nepali and Laos charm combined with Australian focus on detail, creating a truly unique and personal experience for travellers looking to enjoy trekking, sightseeing, volunteering and unwinding. If you're looking to travel to Nepal or Laos and really enjoy the local culture, then check it out at www.focustours.com.au. Now, you'll love Jim's down-to-earth, genuine, generous and very caring approach to helping others in everything he's done and everything he continues to do. Jim lives a very fulfilled life of freedom where he combines his love of travel with the ability to teach others and help others less fortunate. And he's done this because he's lived his entire life by design and with intent. You'll hear how he's always been clear about what he did and what he didn't do with his life, about his courage to try and do completely new things and make major changes without apparent fear. And he's achieved all of this by making his money, living below his means, and investing it in property in a way that now funds and supports his ideal lifestyle. Now, as you enjoy his entertaining journey, don't only learn from what he's done and how he's done it, but listen out for where he demonstrates those 7 lifestyle wealth-building characteristics of confidence, frugality, responsibility, social indifference, focus, planning, and delayed gratification, so that you can start learning these traits as essential to your future success. Please enjoy my great chat with Jim Smith. Welcome back, Freedom Fighters. Now, how often have you met someone who seems totally comfortable in their skin and appears to have the limitless and fearless courage to continuously shift their life direction with what appears like apparent ease, to move from job to job and location to location, following their purpose, their passion and their interests, to enjoy a life of fulfillment and full freedom? Well, I'm guessing not very often. So today, you're in for a special treat with Jim Smith, who's someone who continually shows us that he can do exactly that. And I guess I'm really looking forward now to sharing how he's lived by design and how he continues to do it. So welcome, and let's get invested, Jim.
Morning, Bushy.
How are you, mate? You're enjoying some holidays up there on the top in New South Wales, you're telling me?
Yeah, that's right. I'm up in northern New South Wales, and, it's mid-20s today and glorious. The beach is nice, and we're on holidays from school, so everything's going well here.
Good to hear, mate. Now, mate, for those who are probably intrigued a little bit and want to know a little bit more about Jim Smith, tell us who you are, what you do, and most importantly, why you do what you do, Jim.
I'm in my mid-50s, married to my wife Anna, and we live, as we said, in northern New South Wales. I teach casually and also run a small boutique tour operating company, taking people to Nepal, and more recently we're investigating tours in Luang Prabang. I'm the youngest of 5 boys and grew up in Adelaide, and had to battle it out with my 4 brothers growing up. So, I can be a bit rough around the edges.
Mate, the big question, why do you do what you do?
I think the reason I've chosen the lifestyle I have is because I always wanted that little bit of independence and be in control of, the way we wanted to live our lives. I was never that fond of just being on that treadmill of day after day working for the man sort of thing. So very early on, I always, I was pretty handy with my money, and I've always worked and I've always saved so that I could have that independence. And over time, I've come in and out of teaching, but I've always, loved that connection with kids. And, I've liked the idea of helping people kind of reach their full potential. And so that's sort of why I ended up with the travel business, taking people to Nepal. Kids were asking me, about Nepal when I'd come back, and they'd say I was always on my soapbox about, how great it is over there, and a group of kids asked me to take them over there when they finish Year 12 as a schoolies alternative. So that's how it all started, and I just wanted to show them another world when they're at a point in their lives when they were making decisions about their future, and I just wanted to expose them to life outside the ordinary in Australia. So that's sort of crystallised a lot of my, yearnings from an earlier age of just wanting to travel, wanting to experience, and now sort of wanting to share that with other people.
Yeah, awesome, mate. It's a great evolution, and I'd love to now sort of delve into the details of your own journey, mate, so that the listeners understand some of the twists and turns that you've taken in a number of directions, and how that sort of led you back to what you're doing now. Can you sort of give us a run through on what you've invested your time and your energy and your money in from as far back as you'd like to start, and probably start back with your family, given you're one of 5 boys. I'm one of 3 boys, and that was fun enough. So one of 5 would add some complexity to it. But let's start way back then, and then talk us through, how that led you into teaching and whatnot from there.
Okay, yeah, as I said, youngest of 5 boys, so there's 11 years between me and my oldest brother, and smattering of brothers in between. And we grew up in Adelaide. I went to a Catholic secondary school, a primary and secondary school, and my mum worked at the school as a laboratory technician. And my father died when I was only 8, and I think that sort of woke me up a little bit in terms of, having to sort of stand on your own 2 feet a bit. So I got my first part-time job when I was about 12, and that was just, collecting money for people who had their papers delivered to them. So I would, go door to door and, get them to reconcile their accounts and collect their money. And that sort of gave me a bit of independence. I always liked the idea of having, decent things. So, like I saved up and bought a push bike that it was easier to do the paper around, and, when it came time to leave school, I saved up to buy my first car. And so I always had those little goals along the way. When I finished Year 12, I was quite lucky. I got a job with the RAA, the Royal Automobile Association. It's like the NRMA or the RACQ and other stuff. And I was sort of like just in the right spot at the right time, because they rang the school and they were after someone, a male who'd just finished their exams and had their driver's license, and I got my driver's license as soon as I could. So I fit the bill. And of course, because my mum worked at the school and they knew that we hadn't had the easiest of upbringing, the deputy principal was a friend of hers, and so he put me forward for the interview, and I got the job. Really, much to my dismay at the time, because all my mates was, having a great time partying after finishing Year 12, and there was I, a couple of days after my last exam, I had to start work. But, I didn't know how well I'd go in Year 12. I had to take the job because I thought my mum's going to kill me if I don't take the job, and I didn't do well at uni. And anyway, so that was a great introduction to working life, and it really gave me the idea that I do not want to work like this for the rest of my life. There were people who had been at the RAA, and they were doing a great job, and they were very happy, and it was a good organisation, but they'd been there for their whole career, and I just knew that there was more to life than just sort of working for the one boss. Anyway, I did okay at Year 12, so I knew I'd get into uni, but I decided to, get a bit established financially to get me through uni. So I stayed there for a year, and then I resigned and went to Teachers College at University of SA after that. And couple of years through that, I took a year off and travelled around Australia, mainly national parks, just me and a mate, camping and in our tents, and I just wanted to experience. Never wanted to go straight into teaching, not having experienced a bit of the real world, because it's such an important job. You want to have a bit of life experience to share, I think, with kids. So I always wanted to expose myself to a bit more. So I thought I'd have this really difficult, challenging year away from home, travelling around. But to be honest, it was just a lot of fun. And, met lots of younger people travelling around from overseas that you never would have met normally. And often we would meet older people, what's known now as the grey nomads, I suppose. But we'd meet these people and, often they need a bit of help with their caravan or their tent or whatever. It was tricky terrain sometimes because we're in national parks. And, so we'd give them a hand because we had plenty of time. And, then they'd always be wanting to feed us. I think it was just like you were like their kids that they were missing. So we're always taken in for, the odd meal or scones or something like that. Then I came back to uni after that year, and I remember one of my lecturers actually commenting on the change in my approach to uni. Like I just did much better at my assignments and my exams and stuff after that first year, after the year of travelling. And I think it was a bit of maturity, I suppose. I just sort of prioritised my time better and wasn't just about the socialising, that sort of stuff. I actually put a bit of more effort in, and particularly to the science subjects that I was interested in. And, so I actually ended up condensing the last 2 years into a year and a half, and, then went off to my first teaching job over in Victoria.
Yeah, before we go in there, there's something I wouldn't mind just delving into in a little bit more depth if we can, mate, because what I'm picking up from a very early age, you've got this ability to understand the merits of saving money, and a couple of things you mentioned there, like you're sort of knocking on doors, collecting money for the papers. For someone at 12 years old, that would be fairly confronting for a lot of people. One, to knock on the door; two, to ask for money. Where did that there's a resilience that comes out of that, and there's also, I can pick up that you were careful with money and use money in a means by saving it to do things that were important to you. Where did that sort of grounding come from at that early age, mate, do you think?
I think in terms of the money side of it, I think it was probably from my mum, because I could see that we weren't flush for money, but she, I didn't particularly feel poor, and I think she prioritised it, and so it was having that role model that was good with it, and I just knew that there were some things we could do, and if I wanted to do them, I had to earn it myself. So that gave me the drive to get the job. I was given the opportunity because my brother was doing a paper round as well. And when we say we knocked on doors, you had to knock on the door, but they were expecting you because they had an account that they had to pay. So it wasn't so much cold calling, which was good. But my brother's boss knew I was around, and he said, "Does your brother want a job?" So I started off with that, but I'm quite a small fellow, and I must admit I had quite a few of the customers who used to say, is your mum or dad waiting for you in the car as you're carrying around all that money? And it's like, no, I'm just on my pushy. And so, I must have been side, I suppose. In terms of the confidence to go and do it, I suppose it's just from, living in a, reasonably large family and having to hold your own a bit. It's, it gives you the confidence to do that. We had great family networks around us. I had a lot of aunties and uncles and all that. They were all, very encouraging and, would ask questions and stuff. So I suppose I was used to, having to deal with a lot of people. We weren't sort of an isolated family. We had a good network around us. And I think the teachers at the school I went to, because Mum worked there, Admittedly, when I arrived, a lot of teachers took a look at me and I looked like my brothers, and it was like, not another Smith was their reaction. But it was, that was sort of done in jest, and, they, I think, took a little bit of an extra interest in me because, then my mum worked with them. And so I suppose I developed those, the ability to talk to people and chat and confidence from that network that we had around us.
Yeah, got it. And when you dipped your toe in the water at the end of high school and did that work with RAA for a stretch, what was it, do you think, that you saw those guys, men and women, had been there for a lifetime almost, and as you say, were quite happy with that? What was it that in the back of your mind going, no, this is not for me?
I think the idea of working for someone full time and having 4 weeks holiday a year just wasn't enough. My brothers had, a few of them had done various activities, gone to uni, and then maybe not continued, and some did continue. But they tried a couple of different things. So I knew there were other things out there. One of my brothers was really had worked for a couple of years, saved up a lot of money, and just went travelling. So I just think having those people, being exposed to people who had done different things other than the ones at the RAA that were staying put, made me think, there's a whole world out there bigger than just, working full time and having your 4 weeks holiday a year. I just knew it was never going to be for me.
Yeah, okay. And when you went to teachers' college, you focused on science. What was appealing about science to you, mate?
I had a really great biology teacher in Year 12, and she was a family friend as well, and she was sort of inspiring as a teacher, and great sense of humour, and I think she instilled an interest in it. I mean, I just enjoyed it a lot, and so when I went to uni, I did science and environmental studies, and went down that, sort of drifted into it more than anything, and I enjoyed the units of work we did there, and so I sort of did more of them.
Yeah, interesting you say it, because I know this myself, that how much of an impact a good teacher has at that very formative age on the rest of your life, actually. And was part of that the inspiration for you getting into teaching, and as a consequence of that, have you enjoyed the same satisfaction out of seeing your own students inspired by what you're doing and the impact that you've had on their lives?
Yeah, I would say it's been twofold with going into teaching in the first place. I suppose because, like I said, Mum worked in the school, we were exposed to a lot of teachers, and you could see that they led pretty good lives. And I remember even having a grade 6 teacher who I really liked, and even then I could do this, and because you have the opportunity to make kids enjoy or help kids enjoy their learning. And like as a science teacher, I always tried to do as much prac work as possible, doing experiments, because they enjoy it so much more, and they're engaged and they learn it a lot. And even now, as a casual, when you're taking science, it's optional to do pracs with kids when you're a casual. You don't have to, because you often might not know them or how the class runs, but I'm always willing to do it, and then I get requested because of that, which is a good thing. And I think it's just a great opportunity to engage the kids more and help them enjoy their learning and develop their sort of, the best they can, and try and switch them on to science. And the other thing associated while we're on teaching, the other thing I find, sometimes I get questions from people about, you're just a casual, don't you miss getting that academic satisfaction out of kids learning your subject? But I really find that there's a lot of room for people like me in a school who You have a little bit more time because you're not doing the marking and the preparation and all the extra stuff. You have a bit of time to invest in kids in your class. You can wander around, ask them how they're going. You can chat to them in the playground when you're on yard duty. So you might not be responsible for them achieving so much academically, but I'm a stickler for manners because I think manners helped me get my first job and plenty of others, and they cost nothing. So I put energy into a lot of the social sort of stuff associated with kids in school, and I think you get a good result because so many kids just need that little bit of extra, just someone being interested in them. And so there's room for people in schools who aren't just swamped with all the admin and marking and preparation that goes with being an ordinary teacher.
Yeah, I think that's you've hit on something right there, mate. Because there's an impression by a lot of people that teachers have got it pretty easy, but the ones that I know and have been mates for years, they work damn hard. There are a lot of nights marking and a lot of weekends, preparing, and it's pretty full on. What I love about what you're saying there, though, is that you're recognising that yes, while academia is part of life, becoming good humans is a much better part of that, because that's going to assist them in all areas of their life, whether they go on academically or they don't, and a lot don't, of course. So having the freedom to do that, given that, and we'll get to this later, that you've sort of gone down the casual teaching rather than the full-time teaching exercise for a bunch of reasons. It must be quite satisfying to see the kids where you have had an impact, where your interest in them is creating an interest in life for them. And would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, definitely. And I've seen results of it twofold. Like there's been, the tours that have started happening as a result of kids asking me to take them to Nepal, and we still keep in touch and in a chat group and stuff like that on Facebook, and you've exposed them to another side of things, and that's come about by being in this, meeting them through the school. And another, I had one kid a few years back. I ran a reading program within the school when I stopped being casual and ran this reading program to help. I refer to them as slow progress readers, and it's not people with disabilities. It's just they might, for whatever reason, they might have trouble, like dyslexia or something. And this kid, NAPLAN isn't the be-all and end-all of everything, but I did use it as a tool to help me to, work with the kids and select them. And this kid was getting band 5s in maths, and band 5 is pretty average, and you wouldn't expect maths to have so much of a reading program to have so much of an impact on maths. But anyway, this kid really achieved good results in the reading program, and the next time he did NAPLAN, he jumped up to a band 8, and no one knew that he was good at maths. And it was because he couldn't read the questions.
Wow.
And so just something like, it's so frustrating when you think of how many other kids might be out there who, just need that extra help. So I was so grateful to the school that they put energy into all forms of kids that need education, whether it's the top end or the kids that need a bit of extra help. But, and then just like it was only a couple of weeks ago, like they had the Year 12 graduation, it was adjusted because of COVID and stuff. But this kid stood up there, and he got an award for academic excellence in technology. And I just thought, if the school hadn't put resource into that program, there's a chance that he never would have got anywhere near that. And it was so satisfying.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Awesome. All right. Sorry, I took you off on a tangent there. It's sort of coming back online with your journey so far. You finished Teachers College, and why Victoria, mate? Again, I'm interested in why the easy thing to do would have been jumping into the Catholic Ed system or the public school system in South Oz and working from there. What was the enticement to look further afield?
Look, I was always after, different experiences. Even when I was at Teachers College and we had our prac placements, I only did one in the city. The others, I went to Alice Springs, I went to the southeast down near Mount Gambier, and I went to Ceduna over far western South Australia. And I was always after something different. Most people just went in their second year to the country. And as it turned out, when I finished, like I said, my mum had close relationships with the Maris brothers, and we had people in and out of our homes our whole lives. And this brother was over visiting mum, and I, went out and said hello to him, and he asked me what I was doing, and I said, I'm in my final year of Teachers College, and he said, well, let me know when you finish, because, you never know if I've got jobs. And as it turns out, they did find it hard to get science teachers over in the Gippsland. And so I wrote to him, and he, in those days, you wrote letters, and, it wasn't even phone. Even phone calls were a bit expensive. So he offered me all these, a variety of sort of a mixture of jobs, which was some long service leave for some staff. And it wasn't what I was trained in. It was like English and RE and geography. And the geography is pretty aligned with what I did because of science and environmental studies. And he said, take your pick out of this and we'll create a load, and you've got 2 terms worth of work. And I'm like, so I was just working through that. And the next thing, the phone did ring, and he said, when can you start? And my science teachers just left. It wasn't the easiest of school, and this young teacher had just left because she wasn't coping. And I said, I've got, 2 months of my final block of prac teaching in Ceduna I've got to do first. And this principal took my classes for me until I could get over there. So I was lucky, I think, he knew the family, and, when you're employing someone, knowing someone's going to fit in is important, as well as assuming they're going to be able to do the job. So that's how I ended up over in Victoria. I looked at it, I'd never heard of Traralgon before, and I looked at it on the map and saw that it was, an hour from the beach, 2 hours from the ski field, and an hour and a half from Melbourne, and thought, well, looks good. So I went off with my camping gear, that I used, that I thought is what I was going to use in the share house that I was in. But I arrived and I was sharing with another girl who got a job there also from the same Teachers College as me, and she promptly put my camping gear in the shed and brought out her own gear.
Classic, mate. So how long did you spend in Traralgon?
18 months, and it was, so I just really wanted to work long enough to save up enough money to travel overseas, and also to get enough teaching experience under my belt to know that I liked it or whether I wouldn't like it. And, I nearly stayed a bit longer because I really enjoyed it, made a lot of good friends there, and considering I was only there for 18 months, it's had quite a big impact on my life, and I've still got good friends from there, and my wife's from there, and so it was a great starting point.
Awesome. And did you meet your good wife in the teaching, or just in the local social arena?
Through the school. She was a secretary in the front office. So
they often say that you end up marrying your mother, mate. It sounds like a bit of the same story there.
Heaven. To be honest, they are quite different. But I think we did have this, we had that similar background. She was one of 5 as well, and brought up in the Catholic system and all that. So there's, and she's of an Italian background, and although, quite different upbringings, really, a lot of similar values, I think, and that's what's, kept us in good stead.
Yeah, let's talk about values, because I can see that you're a person, having done some homework around your journey, that values are pretty important to you. What are they? When you talk about family values, but what are the important values to you, Jim?
I think being able to trust people, is really important, and people with integrity who do what they say they're going to do, and not so much the do as I say, not as I do. I think that's been important. Recently, when we were overseas when COVID hit, and came back, and we were in that window where you didn't have to quarantine, but you had to self-isolate. So you weren't in a hotel, we went straight home. And we did it by the letter and just stayed home. I didn't leave the property, even though you could have walked on the beach and not seen anyone and all that. We were told not to, so we did. And I was shocked when it maybe sound a bit naive, but I was shocked when the stats came out and they said that a quarter of people, I think it was a quarter of people weren't doing it, or a quarter of people were doing it. I'm not sure which way round that is, but I was just shocked at the number of people who weren't doing the right thing. And because we do try to do the right thing, you assume everyone else does as well. It's sort of not necessarily putting your own needs ahead of everyone else's. It's like, we're all in this together, and trying to act with integrity and trying to, be good to people, help people develop their best potential. Those are sort of the values that I hold true. Not necessarily always, you've got to look after yourself to a certain extent, but, bringing people with you rather than trampling them up over them to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. Bringing people with you. That's awesome, mate. Yeah, terrific, mate. So you spent the 18 months there, saved up some money, and then it sounds like you headed off overseas. Tell us where that led you and why. I really wanted to go on my own, and so I left Gippsland, went off to Greece and Turkey or Thailand first, a couple of months in each of those places. So I travelled through Europe, just meeting people along the way and staying in hostels, and really went around far eastern Turkey, which was, you probably couldn't do it now, a bit dangerous, but really we were met with such hospitality everywhere I went. People just, I think when you're travelling on your own, you get a little bit, people tend to be a bit more friendly, and I'd team up with people for a while, and then your paths would separate when they wanted to go somewhere else and you were going somewhere different. And as I got to more Central Europe, I really travelled a bit cheaper, a bit of hitchhiking and dossing down wherever I could and stuff. And I stayed with some people and would mow the lawns and do jobs for them to sort of pay your way. And then I got to England and caught up again with a bloke I'd met in Indonesia years before, and I'd sent him a card from Thailand and said, I'm on my way. And when I rang him, he said, I knew you'd turn up one day. And he said, I've got a spare room. If you want to come, you can rent it. And you don't need to pay rent till you get a job. And so I went and stayed with him, and I was looking through the paper to try and, look for a job, and it was really difficult because I had no concept of the geography. So, one job would be 5 hours away and, another one would be 2 hours away. So I was wasting a lot of time. And I'm reading through it and I was just yelling out to him, where's so-and-so, where's so-and-so? Of course, no Google Maps in those days. No, the old street directory, you feel lucky. Yeah.
And anyway, I said, where's New Malden? And where's Surbiton? And he said, it's about half an hour bike ride away. And I said, this is my job. And it was like middle secondary science teaching. And it said to write away for the application. And I thought, look, it's starting in 2 weeks' time. And, by the time you write away. So anyway, I rang the school, and the number had been put through to the deputy principal, and he answered the phone. He was in the middle of painting his house, and he started chatting, and, we sort of had a semi-phone. And then he said, look, I'd like to bring you in for an interview. What are you doing? And I said, I've just arrived, I don't know. And he said, I could tell from your accent you're not from around here. And he said, look, I'll come and pick you up tomorrow. Or how are you going to get there? And I said, I'll catch the train or ride a bike. And he said, look, I'll pick you up. It's on my way. So he turns up at the house, and the mate who I was staying with is like 6'6", and I'm 5'7", and the clothes I had after being travelling through Europe were like hardly had any. The one pair of long pants I had washed in hot water, and they'd shrunk. They'd never been washed like in hot water before. And so I had a pair of Dunlop volleys with the toes worn through, these long pants that had become like 3/4 lengths, and just the only collared shirt I had was like a Larry shirt. And so he turned up at the front doorstep, and I couldn't borrow my mate's clothes, and I didn't have time to buy anything. And so I just had to apologise as soon as he arrived. And anyway, he took me around the school, and it was sort of a bit like, on one hand, I didn't look the part because I didn't look like a teacher. I looked a bit like someone who couldn't afford their clothes. And then he's showing me around the science labs, and they were halfway through being renovated, so he didn't have a lot to sell me either. So he was assuring me they'd be finished by the start of next term, which didn't look like they would be. So, and anyway, at the end of it, he offered me the job. So, yeah, I had a great time there teaching these English kids it's a middle secondary comprehensive school, which was the system that they had in place there. And I wasn't with the Aussie Kiwi groups in London. I was with English people, and I really got to sort of immerse myself in, the English lifestyle, and made a lot of friends and had a lot of fun.
Yeah, mate.
So I did. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, what I'm picking up here, there is that sort of limitless fearlessness about you. I mean, again, a lot of people travel, but there's not a lot of people that travel on their own and are comfortable travelling on their own. That sort of fortitude, and then that she'll be right. Like we'll just, I'll let the wind decide where I go and just sort of freewheel it. Is that something that's always been there? Or I'm sort of interested in where that sort of approach has come from, mate.
Look, I suppose it has always been there, really. I think, like I said, I got my first job quite young, and I've always had money in the bank, and that's sort of been a bit of an underlying thing that, it gives me the choice. So, when you were travelling and you're on your own, if you could always afford a decent hotel if you needed to, or a hostel or whatever, but, you might do things, you might camp or whatever to save a bit of money on that. But I always had the choice. And I think, I suppose, the confidence side of it just came from slowly building upon, job upon job upon job, with the initial paper round, and then, working at the RAA and dealing with people there. Nearly all of my jobs have been people orientated, and I suppose it's just as you've gone along, you've built the confidence up. And
you made another really good point there, I think, that a lot of people miss, and that is the peace of mind and the choice that having put some money aside gives you, because you never then, that removes a lot of stress and uncertainty from your life if you've built up a little rainy day reserve that I've got something to fall back on. Talk to us a little bit about that, if you don't mind, because I think it's something that there's still a lot of Aussies that are living week to week and just don't appreciate just how much impact having an emergency fund or a rainy day reserve or whatever you want to call it has on your outlook and the peace of mind that flows from that. Can you talk a bit about that in terms of your thinking at the time around, right, well, I'm going to save up enough so that I don't have to worry too much about money, and I can pick up work as I go, but I'd love to understand your thinking around the time, if you don't mind.
An example of that in London was when, I got that job, but I hadn't run out of money. I still had enough money to keep travelling, but I wanted to keep it as a reserve. And so I topped up the funds there and then kept travelling afterwards. But in terms of day-to-day lifestyle and stuff, right from the beginning, I always saved up for stuff that I wanted. Like camping, good quality camping gear was important to me. So I didn't go out and buy it on a credit card. I saved up for it because I know that you're going to pay more for it if you buy it in credit. And so I have always tried to save for the things that are important to me, and sort of not what I would say waste money on bits and pieces that I don't really need. And then having said that, I do borrow money. I've borrowed money quite heavily, but it's always been for things that I think are going to appreciate. So, for example, I've saved up for camping gear. I've always saved up for cars, because they're things that they're going to depreciate or wear out over time. But the things I have borrowed extensively for has been for real estate. So I looked for opportunities that would arise that would help me eventually to develop a passive income. And so that's where I suppose the real estate journey started.
Yeah, okay. Well, we might come back to that one because we'll finish the sort of the journey as far as the career side it goes. Then I'll circle back and talk about what you did and when and how and what you continue to do in that area, if you don't mind. But all right, so enjoyed the work there in was it Silverstone in the UK for a stretch, and then went travelling again. I'm picking up. Is that, yeah? Well, talk us through the rest of the journey.
From there, I went to East Africa and like Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, Zimbabwe. Had a lot of great experiences, a lot of time there. That was for about 4 months. And a mate of mine who I'd worked with in Victoria, he quit his job and came over and travelled around there with me, so that was good to have someone to travel with, especially a country like that. Yeah. We still in touch and still, bring up, stories of experiences there. And then we went to America after that and travelled around, met up with both of us went over there and met up with another friend of mine who had been working there, and we all travelled around in, it's like we call it the Brady Bunch mobile. It's like the old Brady Bunch car, big old Malibu classic station wagon, and there was 4 of us, him and his wife and 2 of us, and we just went pretty much from national park to national park, very much like I'd travelled around Australia in the early days. And just America has amazing national parks, and so we just did that, bushwalking all the time, and occasionally would, meet up with people we knew here and there, not that there was that many of them. And then came back to Adelaide and, very lucky to be able to, waltz back into South Australia. And, I went back and stayed initially at my old family home. And I just started doing casual teaching and then picked up contracts. And at the end of that year, so this is a year after coming back, just doing casual teaching and contract teaching, there was a job advertised for someone to run retreats in Catholic schools. So I'm not sure how familiar the listeners are with that, but in a lot of private schools, they run Catholic retreats where the kids go away for 2 or 3 days on camp. It was mainly year 11s and 12s, and some also day activities for the younger ones. And if you're not familiar with Catholic education, you might think it sounds very, very religious, and there is a religious component, but it's also about, developing the kids' potential and peer relationships, parent-child relationships, dealing with drugs and alcohol and whatever issues are arising. And I really enjoyed it when I was at school, and I actually went as a volunteer. After I'd left school, when I was at Teachers College, I went back to my old school and volunteered there, and I think that put me in good stead to get this job. It was advertised in The Australian and it was based out of Sydney. And anyway, I got this job. It was pretty funny, actually, because I went to the interview and I've got curly hair, and the family friend knew the order of priests that ran these schools and that were interviewing for the job. And this lady is a formidable character, and she was probably in her 60s then or something, and all her kids had gone through the school. She knew them all back to front. And so she takes me down to this job interview, and I'd said to her, "Look, I just had a haircut, but I still look untidy." Da da da. Anyway, she waits out in the foyer where I'm waiting to have the interview, and the priest walks out, and she introduces me to him because she knows this priest so well. And she says, "This is Jim. He's from a good family, and his hair's not untidy; it's just curly."
That's a good intro to the interview, mate.
Yeah, and I think it was pretty much her way of saying, if you don't give this guy this job, you're in trouble. So anyway, I got the job, and it was such a great experience. Travelling around Australia, I didn't need my own accommodation because it was all either staying in schools, like they were all mostly boarding schools, so there was always somewhere they'd give you a room somewhere adjacent to the boarding house. I'd play sport with, tennis or squash with the kids after school. It wasn't one of those jobs where you ran the camps, the retreats the whole time. You worked in the school for also about 3 weeks a year, in addition to the retreats, where you would interview the Year 12 students, and they did a personality temperament test.
Okay.
And it was really an affirmation type exercise where you're just getting them to talk a bit about themselves and in relation to how they fit in with this personality profile. And it was really especially for the kids who didn't see themselves as being popular, it was, I'd say, when you go into a room or a party, do you tend to sit back a bit, or do you tend to be the life of the party? And I'd say, oh no, I'm one of the ones that sit in the corner or whatever. And I'd say, that doesn't mean you're, a better or worse person than the person who's the life of the party, because you might be better at having one-on-one or small group friends, and that person's better at having lots of friends, but it doesn't mean they're better or worse. It just means they're different. And it really you could see the light bulbs going on with these kids, and it really did make a difference to them. And so it was, a great thing that the school, these schools invested in this team, me and a priest that went around and ran the camps, and because it was a considerable amount of money to pay a teacher to do this, and 5 schools around Australia. So I got to go to Darwin and Toowoomba and Hamilton, Victoria, Canberra, and Southern Highlands, and again, it's that developing kids' potential, and we solved problems within the school sometimes where there had been issues, and you'd come back a year later and the kids would talk about how things had changed as a result of the retreats and the interviews. So.
Yeah, really, really impactful work, mate. Again, what I'm hearing is that you're not scared to have a crack. You'll sort of put your hand up. There's not a lot of self-limitations here, but I'm also sensing that you get a lot of joy and satisfaction out of those light bulb moments that would have occurred for a lot of kids who, there's a lot of kids at school, as you say, who would feel like they're not the centre of attention and therefore, don't have the same sense of self-worth as a consequence of that. To talk to someone outside of the loop that says, no, you're just different, there's a relativity there, that would have had a major impact. And I know myself, mate, I was lucky enough when my son was at a Catholic school, we had a fathers and sons retreat, and it was a really good 3 days. We did a lot of physical stuff, but we had a lot of campfire chats and really great bonding activity that sort of reinforces really important values in life, mate. So I can see that would have been extremely rewarding for you.
Yeah, it really has been, and it's like, it sounds like, I've got all this confidence or whatever to do these jobs, but it's actually, it's quite terrifying when you're starting new jobs. It's not like I've sailed into them and found it easy. I've been lucky enough to get through the interviews and get them, but standing up, especially at the start of those retreats the first time, it's quite nerve-wracking, and that's what I think with the viewers, the people listening at the moment. It's like, don't not have a go because you think you aren't good enough or you can't do it. And I think it was said in one of your other podcasts that I listened to, fake it till you make it. It's like you sometimes you can do better than you think you might be able to.
Yeah, very well said, mate. Very well said. Okay, so again, obviously enjoying life there, but I'm guessing something else pricked your interest. Talk to us about where that led you to.
That was a really good opportunity to save because I didn't have any many expenses at all, and I was on a teacher's salary. So I knew that was going to set me up for the future. And so while I was there, we'll touch on it probably later in the real estate, but while I was travelling around, I bought a house in Darwin as a result of that. But following that, I went to Canberra for a short period of time and got a job in a school there, one of the schools that nearby one of the schools that I had been working in. And that was probably one of the hardest periods of my life. The school was very much footy orientated school. It was all boys, and coming from running retreats, and there was a lot of delving into getting kids to develop their potential and that sort of thing. I really struggled in this school, and I lasted 2 terms, and then I just ended up quitting. So it was really quite, I just knew that I couldn't stay there. It was just grueling every day, really difficult school. And I'd had difficult kids in London and stuff, but I just did not fit in with this sort of environment. So I quit that, went back to Adelaide with my tail between my legs, and I thought, right, I'm not going to teach. I'm going to do something else. And so I looked around for what opportunities were out there, and I can remember this friend of my brother's in Sydney, and she was a medical rep, and I rang her, and I didn't know what that sort of job was at the time, but she talked about it a bit, and I thought maybe I could do it. And I rang her, and she said, yeah, with your medical background, with your science background, you might be right, but you don't have any sales experience. You never know. Anyway, so I applied for a job, several jobs, and I ended up with interviews, and I got a job as a medical sales rep with Glaxo. It was Glaxo at that time, then Glaxo Wellcome, then became GlaxoSmithKline, major pharmaceutical company, and that was just a fantastic experience because they put so much energy into you. Well, it's really hard to get the job. Once you've got it, they want to keep you, and they train you to within an inch of your life. And you're always doing courses, whether it's computer skills or conflict resolutions or problem solving, whatever. And I just absolutely thrived. And when you're doing one of those jobs where you don't feel like you're working, yeah. I don't know whether you've ever had that opportunity, but that's how I felt initially.
Yeah.
Made friends. I was going around seeing all these doctors, and you're talking about your product. I sold asthma drugs, and they were great drugs. They did well, and they helped people, and if they were well prescribed. So I spent a lot of time on asthma management and protocol and stuff. But doctors do know a lot, and they have an extensive amount of training. But when you're a rep, you're dealing with your drugs 100% of the time, whereas doctors might see 10% of their patients that are asthmatic. So you often will know the latest developments and the intricacies of your drug and that. So you can be helpful to the doctors and their patients as well as being doing your job and selling the drug. So it was a good job. Then I really was enjoying it, and then jobs came up in head office, and I was ready for a change. And so head office is in Melbourne, and so I applied and I got a job as like an associate product manager in marketing, and that was also fantastic. Great experience, and met some amazing people. And one thing that really struck me about, the workforce there was I always thought these people in marketing were whiz kids, like they were really bright and, a cut above. And look, there were a lot of bright people there, but a lot of them were just slogged it out. They were just hard workers and had good work ethics. And that's what got them success. And also good people skills went a long way as well. So I was recruited to run this program that wasn't so much a drug, but a program to help doctors engage patients who had asthma. And so it wasn't talking about how to use the drugs, it was talking about how to communicate with the patients. And it was really interesting. I worked with some great people who owned the program and licensed it to Glaxo. And, really great mentors for me in terms of developing life skills and developing, conflict resolution skills and problem solving. Older people who had a lot of experience in pharmaceuticals and in various jobs in the world, and they really, really helped me a lot. But I knew when I moved into marketing, as soon as I got there, I knew that I was not going to stay in a head office forever, because I just did not like being cooped up in an office. I did not like having 4 weeks holiday a year, and I was quite unhappy initially, and then I got stuck into the job a bit more and it got better. But I knew at the start, I thought, right, I'm going to do this. I don't want to bail on it while I don't have the experience, but I'm going to stay long enough so that I've ticked the box as having done this marketing job, and then I'm going to change. I didn't know what to at that stage, but so I stayed in that job for 18 months, or nearly 2 years, and then I resigned. And in that time, I had a mate who lived up at northern New South Wales, and I love the area, and I actually. We bought a house up here when we were still living down in Melbourne, and then once I bought the house, I thought it might be a few more years, but once I bought it, I thought, we've got to move up here. So I resigned from Glaxo and then moved up. And funnily enough, I didn't plan for this, but the relationships I built with the people who licensed this product, the partnerships program, they approached Glaxo and said, can we put this guy on as a trainer of the program? Now, all the other trainers were psychologists and counsellors and people who with, quite high qualifications. There was only 6 of them. And I was, my qualifications was in teaching, but they said, the company said to Glaxo, he knows the program back to front, and he knows doctors, he knows the repping world and stuff. So, let's give him a go. So they put me on as a trainer, and it was consulting work, which I'd never done before, but it was fantastic because I started establishing myself up in northern New South Wales. We moved into a house, and I was able to start doing relief teaching, and I also did contracts then, and at the same time was starting to do the consulting for Glaxo. And it went from strength to strength because the program was going really well, and they were running a lot of sessions, and they did have a bit of trouble with the Queensland trainer, and so I got all the training work for Queensland. And so you'd be going to Cairns and Townsville and Mackay, as well as Brisbane. I went to Perth. I'd go back to Adelaide. So I was training all over the place. It was really good money. And then what also happened was a lot of my colleagues down in Melbourne in head office needed work done for them, training reps, or, the training department were short on staff. And so I was getting given work by my old colleagues because they knew I knew the work environment where I had just come from. And it's sort of like, Johnny on the spot. You can go down there and fill a gap for a while until they could employ someone who wanted to live in Melbourne. And so I did a lot of consulting then for the training department and the marketing department down there, and as well as running these training programs. So I had a really good time economically. I was able to, save a lot of money and pay down my house mortgage, and then at the same time established myself in teaching up here. And it sort of almost died a natural death, the consulting. I just slowly found that as I was doing two jobs at once with the teaching and the pharmaceuticals, I just realised it was so obvious how much happier I was in schools when I had a school work day than I did working in the corporate world. And so I slowly just wound it down bit by bit, just sort of looked for less work and then concentrated more and picked up the teaching more. And I've only worked in two schools up here, and now I've cut that back and I just work at one. And, I've continued with that up until recently when I've started doing the tour operating.
Yeah, well, before we sort of delve into that a little bit, what I'm sort of reading between the lines here is you're coming across as someone who obviously gets along with people at any level, and I'm guessing that the reason why they wanted you to deliver the training program over the academics, the psychologists, and the heavy hitters in that regard is that you would talk in a language and in an approach and a style that everyone would relate and feel comfortable with you straight away. You'd build rapport very quickly, so you'd be very effective at doing that. But I'm also sensing someone who doesn't like to have a leash around their neck, and that having a bit of freedom and variety is clearly something that's pretty important to you. Is that sort of what sort of underrode that approach, do you think?
I would say definitely. I've always been like that. The longest I've actually stayed in a fixed job has been about 5.5 years, and that was the pharmaceutical company, and within that I had two different jobs. I think it's just inbuilt in me. I've always been like that, liking to have variety and liking to have a choice about what I'm doing and not being tied down. I don't mind hard work, but I like it sort of to be on my own terms.
Yeah, awesome. And I'd love to take the opportunity now, if you don't mind, to sort of delve into your property journey, because I sense that part of the freedom and the confidence and the choices that you're able to make has been built on the fact that you've been clever with your money, or you've done things with your money rather than spend it and lash it up on a lavish lifestyle. You've put it into things that have then in turn enabled you to get more time back and do other things. Can you talk to us? You sort of mentioned property a little bit early on. Talk to us about when you started to think about investing in other things and putting your money into things that are going to sort of give you an income later on. Tell us about what was it that gave you that thought, and then what did you do, and then where does that led you to on the property journey?
I think I first started thinking about it when my brother, one who's 9 years older than me, he bought a house, I think, and then sold it a couple of years later, and I remember it having doubled in value. It was probably back in the 80s or something. And I remember at the time thinking, it was the grand sum of $150,000. And I remember thinking, I've missed the boat. I'm never going to be able to buy a house. It's too expensive. And, you laugh about it now. But I just remember thinking, I want to be able to have the security of my own home, but I also want to, work on getting property to help me to have a bit of freedom, and I wanted to go hard young so that I could relax a bit when I'm the age I'm at now. I'm in the mid-50s now, and I can, like we talked about earlier, I've got a bit more choice. And so, I did put it aside while I travelled. I wanted to work and travel, and I didn't want to have any ties then. But as soon as I came back from overseas, I think I was in my mid-20s, my next objective was to buy a house. And so when I had that job I mentioned earlier, when I had the job running the retreats, I didn't have many outgoings. I didn't have, to pay rent or anything like that. So I saved a deposit. And because I was travelling around to these 5 spots around Australia, one of my brothers had said to me, consider Darwin because the rent returns are really good. So I looked up there and, when I was there, and I think it was the second year I was on the tour, on the, work trip up there, there was a house there, it was $90,000 and it was bringing in $200 a week. And most of my other mates were starting to settle down and buying houses, and I didn't want to be left behind, but I wasn't ready to settle down at that point. And so I thought, well, this is, it's probably got as much capital gain in Darwin as anything, but I can buy this house and it's not going to affect my lifestyle because I'm going to be able to I'm not going to have to put much money into it because the rent return was so good. And so I bought that house and rented it out for quite a few years. Then when I moved back to Adelaide and was working with a pharmaceutical company, I was living in this house that was a big old 1920s bungalow that, you get in the sort of eastern suburbs of Adelaide, a beautiful area, lovely tree-lined street. I like the old houses. It wasn't flashy, but it was, solid. And it had been converted into 3 apartments. So it had it was on a corner, being built on the side and built on the back. And I was living in one section. And the owner decided to sell it. And my brother and I had been looking around to buy something. And because we had worked out that, at the time, I probably had about $125,000 I could spend on a house. And if I combine that with my brother, we got way more than double the value in the property. So if you bought something for $250,000, you were getting something really substantial, whereas spend $125,000, you might have just got a masonette or, a duplex style place.
Yeah.
So Phil, my brother and I decided we would go in together. Anyway, this house came up. It was a bit more than what we wanted to spend, but it had again, like Darwin, it had a really good rent return. And I was always looking for properties that were a bit different or a bit unusual, whether or not you might be able to divide the backyard off or whether you could convert it into get 2 rents or things like that. So this property was perfect. And as I said to my brother, I'd pay not to have to move, And we put in an offer and he let us. He gave us sole rights to put offer in before he actually listed it with an agent. And it's interesting, it's something for your listeners to consider. I was limited with how much money we had. We couldn't really go much higher. But one thing we were at when we had our finances ready, so we were ready to make an offer, so there weren't a lot of strings attached. That put you in a strong position, even though you might not have as much money as other people. So we're ready to go. But also, this fellow's sister-in-law lived in one of the side flats, and I think he was worried, that she would be kicked out if someone took over, when he sold it. So I think that weighed on his mind a bit. So we said, well, we can't give you any more money, but we can guarantee you we won't, change the living situation of your sister-in-law. And he knew we'd gotten along well with her. And I think that actually swayed quite heavily. So sometimes when you're trying to buy a property or sometimes you have things that don't add up to money that can help sway the vendor or the person selling the house. And anyway, so he accepted the offer. We offered to put it in a contract that we would, kick this tenant out, and but he didn't need that. Our word was enough, and we took it over, and she stayed there for quite a few years, and then eventually left of her own volition.
Yep. But what I love about what you've just said then is the recognition that there's more important things than just money. Often it's you've tapped into the emotional needs that are attached to the relationship for the owner that recognised the need to protect the sister-in-law, where the average punter, one, wouldn't even know that was the case. And two, wouldn't even think of discussing that. So you've been smart enough pretty early in your investment career there, mate, from that side to think way beyond just price in terms of let's negotiate a win-win that's going to work for us, but is going to work in other ways for the person selling the property.
Yeah, and also if it's, work for both of us, but also, she was a good tenant as well. So, it's... If you've got an opportunity to be decent to people, and there's no reason not to take it. And I've taken that view all the time with property. I really find it hard when you hear the stories of the conflicts between landlords and tenants. I don't understand people not maintaining their properties. And if you've got a good tenant, it's better not to have the most expensive rent. It's better to be a bit under market so that they're not feeling like they're being taken advantage of, and they value staying where they are. And, sometimes, nearly every time someone moves into a property, there's always something that they would like that other tenants necessarily don't care about. Now, for example, property I've got at the moment, we were talking about doing something, and this tenant said, look, I don't care about that, but I'd really like overhead fans. And so we put them in, probably I think it was $700 for 2 fans, all done. And, you've got a happy tenant.
Exactly.
And there were, all it takes is for that tenant to change once or twice, and there's that $700 gone anyway.
Spot on. You've only got it. There's a week's rent at $500-600 a week. You don't have to have many weeks vacant for fans to be soaked up very quickly. So that's again really smart thinking, and the having good regular tenants for a length of period that are happy in the property is gold. If you're a property investor, that's the holy grail in terms of making sure you've got an enjoyable property experience. So yeah, love the thinking around that, mate. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What else have you done in the property sphere, and what's it looking like now?
Just a little bit of a side thing on the property in Adelaide. We switched over to short-term accommodation quite a few years ahead of Airbnb. And we did quite well out of that for quite a few years, and then had to upgrade it a bit to keep it in the market. And so that was a good way of going for a while. And it also when I moved away, it gave us the flexibility to be able to come back and stay there occasionally. But when Airbnb hit, initially the bottom fell out of that. So we converted them all back into permanent rentals, which they are now. I have considered making maybe part of the short-term rental again now that there's Airbnb agencies that run things. So when looking at property, it's good to have, properties that are flexible, that you can think, right, we're going to make it all Airbnbs or part of it Airbnb and part of it mainstream rental, and so it gives you spread your risk a little bit, and also gave us some personal flexibility in being having somewhere to stay when we came down.
Sensible. Yep.
Yeah, and so from there moved to Melbourne. So I was working pharmaceuticals in Adelaide, living in eastern suburbs, then moved to Melbourne and rented in Melbourne. And then the next place I bought was probably the most emotional buy. We didn't want to stay in Melbourne. I travelled around Australia when I was younger and loved the northern New South Wales coast. And a mate lived down in the section where we've ended up buying, and it backs onto National Park and it's walking distance from the beach, and I grew up walking distance from the beach, so that was sort of my benchmark. And I said to him, look, if you see any it was before realestate.com and all that. And I said, if you see any properties come up along this stretch, will you let me know? Because, I want to buy something. I want to move to this area eventually. And anyway, he rang and said, look, this place that's come up, it's similar to mine. It's just an old sort of beach house. And I was really going for the position more than anything. And I put an offer in for it without even having seen it, because he said it was like his. I knew the block, I knew the street, I knew what I wanted. And in those days, you weren't really paying a premium for the national park behind us. The newer houses at the other end of town were more popular.
Yeah.
And anyway, the next week I came up. I hadn't signed anything before seeing it, but came up and purchased that one. And my thinking at the time was, even though I'm sort of buying it really as a personal thing rather than investment, I had a feeling that, this area was going to go up as much as anywhere else anyway in terms of value. And maybe it might have been good to invest in Melbourne, but this was a bit more of a personal choice rather than just buying for investment. And so we purchased it, and we've never looked back.
Yeah.
And I thought it'd be a few years before we moved up, but in reality, once I had it, I couldn't wait to get up here. And that's when I resigned from the pharmaceuticals and went into the consulting and the teaching, and we moved into it, and it's just slowly fixed it up over the years.
Yeah, I love it, mate. That's awesome. And what I'm hearing is the remaining property you've got to, because they're such strong yielding properties, they'll be giving you a good rental income to take the pressure off having to work a 5-day permanent job anyway.
That's right. That's right. And while I had several I had the Adelaide property, the Darwin property, and the Cabarita Beach property, while I had all them, at one stage I wasn't living in any of them, so I was able to take advantage of negative gearing, and while I had bigger mortgages, that was helpful, and I also had higher salary, so it was helpful. But when I moved in here, I was talking with my accountant, and his advice at the time was, you've got to have significant capital. I had a big mortgage on Cabarita where I was living, which wasn't tax deductible, and I had a small mortgage on the property in Darwin because I'd paid a bit of it off, and it had grown a bit in value. And also I didn't go to Darwin very often, and it was a bit inconvenient, and it was a bit of a high risk area. So I actually sold that property and paid off as much of my mortgage as I could on the Cabarita property and where we were living, so that I transferred, so I had a smaller mortgage that wasn't tax deductible.
Yeah, smart.
And then I just made it my mission from there. I still had the Turak property, but I made it my mission to pay off this one as soon as I could where we lived. So I worked on that, and it was good when I was consulting, so I just powered into that. Didn't lead a lavish lifestyle. Time is more important really for us than having too many whiz-bang things. And anyway, we paid this off, and then pretty shortly after that, a duplex came up in the same street and where we are in Cabarita, and I knew that it was a growing area, and access to Coolangatta Airport, growth in the area, and so then we borrowed again and bought a duplex down the road. And with that one, we had to substantially renovate it in order to get a better rent return. But again, it was better to spend money, borrow more money, and renovate it, and add a couple of bedrooms and increase the rent than it was to have in terrible condition, where tenants aren't really happy.
Well, yeah, and you're investing in your future, mate, because you're upgrading the quality. You're restarting the clock on depreciation on a lot of the fixtures and fittings, so you're sort of getting a benefit from that. And you're in an area that's and right now, mate, given what's just happened with COVID, regional living where there's a perceived space and safety are going to become even more valuable. So locations like you're in are going to become extremely popular. Even more so than they have been. So you're sitting on potential very strong capital growth as a consequence of that. So pretty smart thinking there, mate. Mate, thanks for sharing that. That's been awesome. I'd like to just, I guess, conclude the journey talking about what I see as a real passion of yours, and it obviously been a passion right through your life, which is travel. And the ability that you have to have combined your passion for travel, but also with helping particularly young people and others to expand their appreciation of the world and their appreciation of giving to others through the quite unique boutique travel company that you've created. I'd love you to share that story with us.
Over the years we've had, groups of people that have just sort of tagged along with Anna and I on holidays and shown them around places where we'd been in Nepal and in India, and that was just something we did for fun and to share the experience with people. And then when I was working at the school I operate at, I would always come back, and if the kids were complaining about anything, I'd always get on, the kids say, you're always on your soapbox when you come back from Nepal, talking about how, hard they have it and how we need to appreciate things more and all that sort of stuff. And anyway, these kids that I'd had them through from grade 7 right through up until year 12, and, just those type of kids that, they don't want to go to the Gold Coast and get drunk for their schoolies, after they finish year 12. They're after a bit more and something a bit different. And so this group of 5 kids approached me and said, would we take them to Nepal? And I thought, oh, yeah, great, very enthusiastic about it, da-da-da, they wanted to do some voluntary work. Yep, that sounds good. And anyway, as I looked into it, nearly everyone I spoke to, people said it would be a good experience, but anyone in the lawyers and stuff like that I was trying to get advice from, they were just like, don't do it. And it was really quite deflating. And I actually, I was overseas at the time. I wrote to the main girl who was organising it, and I said, look, I'm sorry, it's just, there's too much liability. I'm not going to be able to do it. But, and I gave them plenty of time so they could organise something else. Well, in true fashion of kids at school, they only hear what they want to hear. Anyway, so a few months later, I get an email and it's like, what's happening about Nepal? And then I had to explain it all over again and felt terrible because it was closer to them finishing. Still well ahead of finishing, but, closer. And anyway, her dad got on the blower and phone and he said, and I could tell he was sort of, are you saying this because you don't want to do it, or you're saying it because it's a real concern, and fair enough either way. And I said, no, I really want to do it, but, it's just not worth me losing my house over if anything goes wrong. And he goes, well, leave it with me. I'll see, we can work out something with lawyers. And he got in touch with a mountaineer who had, a lawyer he knew who had done a contract for a mountaineer who had done something similar, except for mountaineering was way more strenuous than anything we did.
Yeah.
And so he put me in touch with this guy and the parents at all, because I was donating my time to do this and covering all my own costs. So it wasn't a business at all. And so the parents said they would pay for the cost of the lawyer to draw up a contract, an indemnity letter. And anyway, as it turned out, the lawyer thought it was such a great idea that we're offering this to kids that he did it pro bono anyway. And so they signed this indemnity letter. Look, it doesn't protect you completely, but, it's the best you can do, really.
Yeah.
And so off we went. And, what some of the questions that we talked about earlier or I've read about in your other podcasts is, some of the mistakes you've made. And one of the mistakes we got away with it, but I made here was that I just didn't charge the kids enough money. I was trying to give them as cheap a experience as possible, and as I said, I was covering my own costs and my airfare, everything, and volunteering my time.
Yeah.
But of course, my good mate over in Nepal who runs a trekking company, he runs treks, but he's not used to running all the rest of it. And all the costs I'd got from him were just way under what they really were. And I was lucky that I built enough fat into it to cover it. But it really, it more than broke even, but it helped me learn a lesson that you really have to do your homework if you're going to be running a business. And these kids, they were fantastic, because when they realised, they overheard Rummy and my mate over there talking about the costs of things and all that, and they straight up said, look, we have to pay more, we'll pay more for this and that, or we'll pay for our own meals or whatever. They were amazing. And it didn't come to that, but I got very vigilant at keeping records of costs, and so for every year since then, I did it for 3 years completely voluntarily, and I kept records of it all. And my main thing was that I wanted to make sure the people over there were getting paid well, and were getting a good deal. So I was able to make sure that happened. But what it did do for me when I actually wrote to the lawyer again and said, things are going really well. I've been done this for 3 years, da-da-da. And he nearly had a fit, because he said, that was supposed to be a one-off thing. You can't do this indefinitely. You've got to set yourself up as a business or not do it. And so my wife and I sort of sat down, and it's like, we loved doing it. She'd been on some of the tours, and do we want to keep doing this, or do we have to give up? And of course, so, I thought, right, let's make it into a business. And then, but what went with that was that it really had to be expanded, because the cost of the insurance and the, ASIC and all the extra things of running a business really add to the cost of the trip, and all that spare money used to go to people in Nepal and to various charities and stuff. Whereas all of a sudden, they were still getting well paid over there, but not what they were, not the cream on the top that they were. Yeah. And the cost of the trip has had to go up so that I'm not out of pocket. I mean, we're still not making, it's not something that makes us a huge amount of money, but it contributes to our lifestyle. But what I have realised is that if I expand and do more variety of tours, then that helps me particularly keep the cost of the schoolies trip done. So that's what we were in the middle of. We just finished researching a tour for Luang Prabang in Laos. Yeah. And it's almost the opposite of Nepal in terms of the type of tour. It's for people in their mid-40s, maybe over, people who want to travel with a group but not be on the move every day. It's slow sightseeing. And for someone who, they might be single and want to be in a group of other people and have a little bit of time on their own, but some group dinners and things like that. And so my wife and I had gone and done all the research on that and put the tours together, and
COVID hit.
That's COVID hit. So, and something that really helps with this sort of stuff is finding people and surrounding yourself with people who are enthusiastic about what you're doing. And we met this lady who had run tours associated with quilting, people who do sewing and stuff like that. I didn't even really know it existed. And she had been a bit like me, just running a couple of tours a year, just for half a dozen people or so. And she got approached by someone about Facebook marketing, and she thought, all right, I'll give it a go. Now, she was going pre-COVID, she was going to be running 10 tours with 20 people at each tour. This is not to Nepal or Luang Prabang, but somewhere else. And so she had embraced this, and it really made me think, right, this is a similar model to mine.
Mm.
This could work for me. And so I was just looking around for someone to revamp my website and all that when COVID hit. I'd already branched out a bit in Nepal we'd ran a mothers and daughters tour. We'd run a couple of different, 2 different schoolies tours. And anyway, so when we came back when COVID hit, I'm like, right, well, what happens? Because we can't do anything. But I did decide while I had a lot more time because I had no work at the start of term 2 because of COVID. The school was online. I had no work for casuals. And so I thought, right, I don't want to spend much money on the business because who knows where it will go. But I did decide to invest in getting someone to redo my website so that I could set it up to take payment and to make it a lot more slick than just for being schoolies groups where I know them all and it's easy for them to pay and stuff. I wanted to expand the types of tours offered in Nepal and to add Luang Prabang. So I did invest the money and the time to update my website. So I've got that all ready to go, and I've got a variety of different tours listed, branched out from just being like, I'm just running the schoolies tour mainly for the couple of schools that I'm associated with. And other than that, we've got a nutritional outreach tour, which is partly voluntary and part trekking. Got a photography tour where people can have the time to take photos, and doing also photography tour in Luang Prabang as well, and textiles in Luang Prabang. So really expanded what's on offer, but with the aim being that that way I can cover the business costs and can continue. I can start to make a little bit of an income, but also can make sure that contributing to the 2 cultures that I'm working in, being Laos and Nepal.
Let's just finish on that, because I think that's the sort of invisible ingredient here that I love about what you're doing is, one, you're respecting the local culture and making sure that you're looking after the local culture by virtue of the way you're pricing the exercise, so that the crew in Nepal, for example, are making appropriate money out of what they're doing. But you've taken it further than that with some of the programs you're doing with the. I think you correct me if I'm wrong here, mate, but you've there's a school that you're supporting with donations and voluntary work from the participants in the tours. Can you talk to us a bit about that? Because I think that a lot of people miss the satisfaction we get out of giving freely to others without expecting anything in return. Can you sort of expand on that a bit for us?
Yeah, it's twofold really. On the side of the trekking and the tours, particularly in Nepal, it's been about teaching the kids that I've been taking, or any of the people I've taken over, how it can be win-win with how you operate in a country like that. Now, our porters on the trek carry about half the legal weight, and we walk very short days, so they get a really good run. And get good conditions. We make sure you can be on these treks and the porters won't eat because they might have to pay for their food themselves, and it's very expensive up in the mountain. So I just factor that in separately and make sure they get good dal bhat every day, usually with meat. So the conditions are good. We try and we play games with the porters. We, muck around with them rather than separate. Sometimes people keep them quite separate and they might only just talk to the guide, but we try and make it a real fun experience for everyone.
Awesome.
And then it teaches the people that come with me that, it's not about getting what you can out of something, it's how you can have win-win. And I like it better than just donating money as well. I prefer to try and donate work where I can and just give everyone a good deal. And I know that they're happy with their environment because their work environment, because there's always a queue to try and come on our treks. my mate over there runs lots of different treks. Small operator, but he's got a lot of international guests, and he puts different porters with different groups, and they're always wanting to come with us. And I know that that's a barometer for knowing that they're getting well treated behind the scenes by his company, as well as what bits that I can have control over.
Yeah.
And then with the children, we've been associated with that children's home for quite a few years, probably about 10 years. And I liked the model that they used, because some children's homes, and you see a lot of bad press about them, particularly in Cambodia, where they sort of embrace tourists to try and get money, and it's just a survival tactic, and I can understand why they do it. But the group we work with Hands with Hands, it's an Australian lady who founded the organisation, and it's on the outskirts of Pokhara, which is a tourist town, and they don't have many tourists come through at all, and they're very closely vetted. You're not allowed to stay after dark. She's happy for I only take the groups of kids there. I haven't been taking other groups of adults. I don't want to start churning people through. Yeah. So it's just the schoolies group that go there. And we factor in a donation that the kids can raise money for themselves. I don't encourage, when my students are, saving up for their trip, I'm not a fan of them raising money to fund their own trip. Some groups do that, but I say, work for your trip, and any money any money you raise through donations goes to the children's home, doesn't go towards giving you a cheap trip.
Love it.
So that's sort of a stipulation.
Love it.
I try and put in it.
Yeah, encouraging the saving and the self-reliance to fund the exercises as part of the learning as well, mate. That's absolutely brilliant, mate.
That's right.
No, I love
and it's been good to see the way the parents have embraced that too, because some of them will say, we'll pay half if you pay half, save half, and things like that to give them a bit of encouragement. Some parents pay for the whole trip, and one grandparent paid for his granddaughter to come along because he had a connection with Nepal and saw the value in what we were doing. But when we give the donation to the children's home, it's with no strings attached. They use it for whatever they want to do. And the beauty of what's come out of it has been quite a lot of sponsorships of kids within the children's home. So the first group I took over wanted to give me a present for taking them, and I said, no, I didn't want one. I was happy to do it. So they decided to sponsor 2 kids, and they've done that. Even though they're all uni students now, my kids, they've sponsored 2 kids right the way through, and that adds up to about $400 a year each, which is a fair bit for a uni student. And they've kept doing that, and it's like 2016, so it's like 4 or 5 years later. So we get that spin-off of helping to support the children's home. They have a great philosophy. They grow nearly all their own food, and the Australian founder lives in Berlin, and she's really good at networking and helping them to become as self-sufficient as they can. They've bought land, and they're building a environmentally friendly rammed earth brick house, which is earthquake resistant.
Wow.
So they're really looking towards the future, how to avoid a disaster from earthquake. So I really my philosophy fits really well with what they try and achieve, and going back every year to the one place and seeing the kids again each year. And even when I'm not on tours, my wife and I go out there and play table tennis with the kids and maybe help them with a bit of homework. It's just great seeing them all grow up from young kids to now they're starting to leave the home and get jobs. And there's a real sense of satisfaction, and I've seen it with the people I've taken with me that they keep in touch now on Facebook with the kids that are in the children's home and stuff, and they've had a lot of satisfaction knowing that they've helped give these kids an education and giving them a safe place to live.
Mate, it's absolutely brilliant. There's so many benefits in what you're doing there for everyone that's involved, and I love that sort of win-win approach that you've adopted and thinking about the learning experience for all and sundry. And having a positive impact and creating lifetime relationships as a result, which ultimately, life is about experience and life is about relationships. So, mate, I take my hat off to you. Mate, I'm going to switch into the old ambush round if I can, because I'm mindful that I've used up a lot of your time today. And they're just 5 quick questions that the listeners love to gain your words of wisdom on. Mate, first of those is, what's your favourite quote and why?
My favourite quote, and I think comes from being, around kids and the types of jobs I've done, is you don't have to be the best, but you should try your best.
Love it.
And I think that's because, like at schools and in the workplace, wherever you are in your life, there's always people with good skills and better skills than others and lesser skills than others, but it's about each of them reaching their full potential, and you're not necessarily going to be competing with someone else. It's sort of being the best person you can be.
Yeah, and I love that, mate. It gets rid of that whole comparison thing, which creates a lot of issues. Mate, on the reading front, what would be the top book that you'd recommend people read and why?
This isn't a financial one, but it's one I really love. Is A Suitable Boy by Vikram Seth, and it's about someone it's about arranged marriage in India, and the typical thing of a young lady and the experience she's going through with being in the environment where you're going to have an arranged marriage, and whether or not that's for you or whether it's not. So I like it because it takes you into a world that's so far removed from ours, and to try and put yourself in someone else's shoes and really, I think it really does a good job of helping you understand why that even still goes on in today's environment, and why sometimes it can be an acceptable way of life. And in terms of the other, and on the financial front, I liked The Barefoot Investor.
Yeah.
Scott Page, I think. I just liked his no-bones approach to it, and common sense.
Yeah, common sense.
Easy to read.
Exactly. Yeah, no, awesome. Mate, a slight shift in subject, because a lot of Aussies feel they pay way too much tax. What's the top legal thing that you've done to minimise the tax you pay?
Negative gearing with property is probably the main way I've paid less tax.
Yeah.
And then other than that, as you would know, like over the years, apart from the career journey stuff that we talked about, my wife and I have taken a year off without pay several times throughout, the last 20 years. And sometimes we structured that so that it was across 2 financial years rather than 1 calendar year, and that way you got a better tax return each year. Yeah,
exactly. It's such a simple thing, but it can make quite a meaningful difference. No, it's that very smart, mate. Love that, mate. Back on the investment front, then, what's both the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received?
The worst is probably, it's too risky, to buy something. It's too risky, or it's too run down. It needs a lot of work, when really this is in terms of real estate, obviously, whereas the main thing I was after was the position. So it's almost irrelevant, and often you're getting that advice from people who aren't prepared to take the risk on any extra property anyway. So that's probably the worst advice I've had, is people trying to hold me back and saying, no, don't do it.
Yeah.
The best piece of advice I would say has been people telling me, start early, start as soon as you can.
Yeah, that's absolute golden advice which you've taken, mate. To be buying property in your 20s, there's still not a lot of that have been smart enough or brave enough to do that, mate. And you've only got to look at the fruit of the richness that it's given you in everything that you continue to do, mate. Very, very sage words, mate. Final question in the series then: what's a personal habit or a daily sort of ritual that you believe has contributed most to your investment success today?
A little bit along the lines of look after the pennies and the pounds, look after yourself. I think I touched on it earlier. I do like good quality products. So I'd rather have one of something than five that's good quality than five that are going to break. So I save up the money and I buy good quality stuff. Rather than buying it on credit, because I think a lot of people don't realise that they just end up paying a lot more for things when they are buying it on credit that they can't pay off at the end of each month. So, you can go out for dinner more often if you're actually paying cash for it.
Spot on. If you're paying, and credit cards, you're paying up to 24% interest. So it doesn't take long for that to chew its head off, and you're absolutely right, mate. When it comes to those day-to-day exercises, can make a massive difference, and it's just instilling the very slight delayed gratification that it takes to save the money rather than have it right here, right now. Mate, love that. Mate, final question then. If I gave you a microphone that spoke to every single one of the 7.7 billion people in the world today and gave you a minute to talk, what would you say?
I would say look around throughout your personal life and your working life and find people that are role models that you want to be like, or that are living a life like the one you would like to live. And then quiz them non-stop for, what steps did they take to get to where they are now, and then, work your way towards it, because nothing happens overnight. Sometimes people here think I've got a pretty cruisy life, but they didn't know me when I was working down in Melbourne. So it's like, don't think it's going to happen overnight, but if you work towards it, set realistic goals. Sometimes you make some sacrifices to get there, but look for where you want to head and look for the steps you can take to get there by quizzing people and surrounding yourself with people that are positive and supportive and, share your dream.
Absolutely love that, mate. It's there's a whole bunch of gold in what you've just said there, but you're absolutely right. Success takes time. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just find someone who's already done it, and just keep asking questions. And and I've always said there's no such thing as a dumb question. The only dumb question is the one that you don't ask. So, mate, you've summed it up beautifully, mate. It's been a real pleasure having a chat to you, mate. I have got a lot of admiration for what you do and how you do it, and the tremendous gifts that you give the people you teach, the people that travel, the people where you travel. I think you've got an awesome mission, mate, that's making a big difference, and appreciate you sharing that with us today, mate. It's been awesome.
Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed it.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jim. We'll be in touch, mate. Thanks for your time. Talk soon.
Okay.
Cheers. Well, freedom fighters, how good was that? To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. It's hello@khgroup.com.au, or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/Get Invested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you live forever and live as if you die